Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for a live stream Q&A for the Log4j Vulnerability. We thought this would be it's new for us, but I thought this would be an interesting way to share some information in a different format compared to emails and blog posts. So we have a short presentation, and then we're just going to kind of freeform some questions and answers that we've already received. With me today is Joe Dunnigan, Principal Architect at Network Center. He works on the application stack, programming and dev work. I am Mike Pagan. I'm a Senior Solution Architect at Network Center. I'm not a diehard security guy, but I have a beard and I have a hacking t-shirt on, so that counts for something. But truthfully though, both Joe and I have a lot of experience in both of our areas. I'm more of an infrastructure person. Joe is an application developer. So we've seen these types of vulnerabilities a lot, and we've done a lot of research on them already in the last, how old is this thing? 7 days. So we wanted to share some information that we've got so far. So can we get the presentation? There we go. So what is it? What does this thing do? Why is it even a thing? Java was dead. I thought Java was dead. And what can I do? How bad is it? And what can I do? So, like I said, real quick, slide deck. So there are two CVEs right now. The 44228 was the initial CVE. That is the most important one. That is the lethal score of 10. Is critical. It's the most important. It involves a remote code execution, which is very bad standard from a security standpoint. The second one was discovered a couple days later. It's 45046. When I made this presentation, it was listed as a 3.7, which is a low security CVSS score. I just literally read 5 minutes ago that it's been updated to a 9. So I haven't had a chance to take a look at that yet, but that one is supposed to be less exploitable, but obviously it's still very serious. So real brief, what does this thing do? Basically, with most security things, you send a mailformed information. You send mailform request to a server that has this logging engine on it, and the problem is that you can hear it send information request back to a server that you control. It will download whatever that is. It's an executable and run that code on the server itself. That's remote code execution. So it can do anything from shutting the server down to installing a crypto miner to installing ransomware or accessing further control on the box, which is why this thing is so dangerous. So fun story, proof of concept. This actually came out as originally an exploit to Minecraft, and then everybody figured out that it was this Log4j engine, and it was everywhere. So if you're into security, or if you just want somebody who is a very good communicator, John Hammond, he's on YouTube. He works at Huntress, has a video. It's about 35 minutes long. It's linked in some of our resource pages, where he actually goes through and exploits it. And he ran calc.exe, which is obviously a very benign application, but it could have easily been format C:, or download this remote control software, or a crypto miner. So being able to execute code on a system that you don't control is bad. So Joe, can you explain what Log4j is and why it's used?
In software development, we don't want to have to reinvent the wheel every time. So we build modular components that can be reused. And some of those components gain popularity over time, and well, in this case, end up being used pretty much everywhere. Anytime there's a Java application, Java web application in particular, there's a good chance that it is using Log4j in order to do logging capabilities.
And nobody knows XKCD. They have a comic for just about everything. So that's where this came from. But you can tell that this little module is used to hold as a part of all of these other enterprise applications. And one little thing can make the internet, give the internet a headache. So how bad is it? It has a CVSS score of anything above a score of 9 or more is critical, and depending on what your security policies are, would denote rapid patching, immediate patching, or remediation. The CISA, Government Security Cybersecurity Agency, has added that list to a known exploited vulnerability catalog, which requires federal, civilian, and executive branch agencies to mitigate patches. Usually they get 60 days to be compliant. It's a federal law. They have to do this. They have to comply. This came out on the 10th. They need to have it done by December 24th. So they were literally given 2 weeks to patch this. Yeah. Merry Christmas, everyone. So, and as we said before, it's remote code execution. And last I looked, I saw an article that 500 vendors, individual vendors, were investigating their use of Log4j and if it was vulnerable. And I saw one particular vendor had 200 products listed, and they had listed that 130 of them were not vulnerable, and 70 of them were still under investigation. And this is 7 day week old, and they don't know about 70 of their apps, which is worrisome, right? So, what can we do? It's important to have an inventory of your application services, to have an idea of when this type of thing comes out. And there are plenty of resources that have lists of affected apps or apps that vendors that have notices about their apps, to know what you have so you can look at that list to know where you stand. Determine if they're affected, either from the vendor itself or from these common sourced places. Decide if you want to mitigate, if there's a mitigation step at all, or if there's a patch available, when to patch it. Right now, there's plenty of vendors that don't have patches for their systems. VMware, for example, doesn't have a patch for vCenter, but they do have remediation that they released yesterday. So it is the two graphics in the side there. What's the threat? What's your asset? What's importance, and what's the vulnerability? And that determines your risk. So at the end of the day, if it's publicly facing, decide very quickly what you're going to do. If you can't remediate it, you can't patch it, some other form of mitigation needs to happen. Web application firewall, consider turning it off. Firewall rule sets, something. So that's my take on it from an infrastructure standpoint. Joe, you look at it differently from an app development standpoint. If somebody made their own application or had another company make their application, what should they be taking a look at if it's not going to be on that list?
Right, but that's definitely not the case. Java is still very much a ubiquitous tool in enterprise application development. So we're going to find this in many large pieces of software. For custom developed software, it is still important to work with the vendor when the vendor's available. Otherwise, there are tools that we can use that are available on the internet in order to search for this library and find out if you have applications running in your infrastructure that are using it. And then there are good mitigation plans. Talked about the VMware one, right? That's kind of a common mitigation path where you can change a configuration of the Java application in order to mitigate this threat. And so that's a valid path to be looking at, depending on vendor support and where your application was sourced from.
And that's a good point about the scanning utilities. There are a number of different types of scanning utilities, some that are run locally, some that are scanned remotely, that you can run on Windows and Linux boxes or against your web applications to see if you have a vulnerable version of this product, and then consider it, take a look at your risk, and then decide what to do. The little, to me, it's all about risk. So externally facing things that are available to a wide swath of users. So you could say that I don't have any things publicly available, but if you have a workforce that VPNs in from their home computers, and that isn't something that you have antivirus on or have any sort of control with softwares and stuff on it, that would be a little more concerning to me, because there might be something on that workstation. Everybody's going to travel for the holidays. If they hop on their in-laws computer, who knows what's on it? And if somebody on that box sees an open VPN tunnel and starts scanning things, conceivably something may be able to find something. So, where are your crown jewels? What's the most important assets you have, and what can you do about it? And that's goes back to knowing what you have, and then figuring out your appetite for risk, and what do you want to do. I'm not saying turn all your stuff off, because we have to operate, we have to do business. But at the end of the day, pay attention to what's out there and look for odd things that are happening. So far, there's been some report of nation state advanced threat agents. We all know that the nations out there that are making money off of probing networks. There's a lot of activities from non-sophisticated people looking to drop crypto miners and things on there. So at the end of the day, so far it doesn't look like bad guys are trying to burn the world down, maybe just trying to make a quick buck with crypto mining. But if you are in a regulated industry, the ransomware is kind of a threat. It's something to obviously continue to pay attention to. So that's kind of what we had from a slide perspective. Like, a lot of this information is rehashed information that we've found on the internet, on social media, on blog posts. Everybody's got their own blog post on it. Security companies, Microsoft, the CSA, all of them have information out there. So right now, we want to kind of freeform a little bit of Q&A. So if anybody's in the chat that has any questions we want to go through, we had some come through from our initial communication to our customers. So we're going to kind of talk through some of the stuff. Is there a way to determine if we are running Log4j? So some of the security companies have the ability to have the scripts. I know one of our partners, Artwolf, has sent their customers a script they want them to run. So consider doing that. If you need any help with that, we can assist with that. Joe, have you seen anything specifically in the app development space where things that in anything app development space that you want to bring up, or anything you've seen that's a little different?
No, nothing too different, right? The detection scripts, a lot of times they're first and foremost just looking for the presence of the library in affected systems. So that can be as simple as searching for a string file name of log4j2-xyz.jar. That's a good starting point. In Linux systems, this package might be installed with the package manager. So looking at installed packages is something that we've done. And some of those scripts are going to take all of that into consideration. So, yeah.
So another one of the initial questions we got from our original communication out to our customers is, if I don't have any servers, does this still pertain to us? And it's a good question, because if you don't have any of your own servers, if you don't host anything in your own environment, does it pertain to you? Yes, because many of the services that you use online, if you're using Google Apps or 365 or Salesforce or Backblaze or any of these types of services, it is very likely they use Log4j in their services somewhere. So that's why it's important to take a look at those vendor lists and see, know what services you use and see if they have updated themselves. One of the benefits of software as a service, platform as a service type applications is the fact that they can do the update once and it updates all of their customers compared to running things on-prem where everybody has to do things individually. So a lot of the things that I've seen services have already updated themselves within probably 48 hours of the stuff coming out. So that's good. But it's important to pay attention. So if something bad does happen, or if you're regulated, you need to report, what's happening, that you've looked at a KB article, or if you looked at an official blog post from Backblaze or something that said that, we noticed the vulnerability at this date, it's been patched at this date, so you know what your exposure was if there was any data leakage, and they're paying attention to that stuff too.
Yeah, and dovetailing on that, business continuity still has a play, right? Both for services that you're managing yourself and software as a service, et cetera, and making sure that where and if possible you have good backups that you can test to mitigate any potential data loss issues.
Exactly.
And this is
So
another good reason to be maintaining an up-to-date software inventory, right? Knowing what you have so that you can more quickly and easily understand the risk to yourself and your organization.
yes, yep. It always comes down to the basics, right? Knowing what you have, who's using it, how many places it's at, so when something does happen, that you can make sure you patch and you get things, you know what to patch and where it's at. So we've got a couple questions from the live stream so far. One question is, how broken is VMware's patch? I can't tell you at this point because it's not out, at least not for vCenter. There have been some patches for some of the Verizon components, I think, but we have not had an opportunity to install them. The big one that I'm paying attention to is vCenter. If you have more than one host, everybody has a vCenter, right? So we haven't had a chance to run it yet. And I think at the end of the day, it's essentially just going to go through and disable this Log4j.
Yeah,
I can't think of the term for it, but
yeah, with the VMware, with the mitigation script, we just got it into our hands yesterday. We've been reviewing it. We're looking at testing it in a controlled environment, right? But reviewed the script and it is performing the standard mitigation, which is to add a flag to the Java JVM startup, which disables the capabilities of this logging engine to basically to log these potentially malicious packets. So looks pretty standard right now. It looks pretty good. So we're thinking that that mitigation path is going to be of value to us in the coming days.
Yep. Yeah, and obviously it's interesting because the mitigation for a vanilla version of this engine is to that was up pretty quickly. How can you do it, and what's the impact on the software you have? And luckily, it's flipping a switch, right? And then like maybe you're restarting your software. So if you want to try that mitigation on your own, you can try it. If it breaks, you can switch it back. And so it should be pretty benign. It's not uninstalling something. But since a lot of this stuff is rooted into like an appliance where you may not have enough to wait for vendor patches. We have another question. We have a database created by a NetCenter as of this week and had a user sign up. No, that's something unrelated, I think. Was there security breach?
Might be worth writing into support so we can check into that.
Yeah, yep. Yeah, definitely. If you think there has been something suspicious on your network, either you think related to this or otherwise, let us know. Obviously, Microsoft 365 takeover is pretty common in a lot of cases. That's where a lot of those types of things come from. So I would take a look at that. So let's see.
Here's a good one. Is there a reliable list on the web that lists a good chunk of vendors / software? That's the CISA list that Mike referenced earlier. It's also referenced on, we have a informational page up at www.netcenter.net. That includes links to a lot of the resources that we have been using and sharing. We've shared that via email and now on that page as well. But the CISA list, they are maintaining an up-to-date list of all known vendors with vulnerabilities.
Yep. So we have a landing page. It's netcenter.net/log4j to make it easy to get to. So we'll be updating that as we find information. On there is the CISA list. There's a list from the Netherlands. Their government agency has a good list also. And it's important to pay attention to multiple sources because I've seen some things on one list that's not listed on another list. And these agencies aren't checking every vendor ever that has made software. They are checking what they have thought to think about at the end of the day. So like I said, I read an article yesterday that said there was 500 vendors that have publicly said something about this one way or another. It doesn't mean they're all have this, or if they do have it, that it is an issue, there's a risk there. But keeping track of 500 vendors and how they're communicating, because I've noticed some of the information is behind a support paywall, or no, I won't say paywall, but it's behind a support login. So as a person without an account checking on a piece of software that I don't use for a customer, it makes it difficult to actually find that information. Preferably, it would be outside of that, so it'd be easy to find and check off vulnerable or not vulnerable. Let's see, there's another question. Oh, yeah. Josh has a good point. Artwolf had a nice script that would check for the vulnerabilities. We used it to do all of our discovery. Yep. We've used that internally some to check for vulnerabilities. The one thing that I wonder about with any of these types of scripts is it only Windows, because it is more likely that this is going to be on a Linux appliance or on a possibly Linux server. Take the VMware vCenter appliance, for example. That's a Linux box. So you can't, running a script on that is, you just have to use a different method to do that type of thing, or a OpenDNS appliance, or things like that.
So yeah, in addition to the Arctic Wolf one, which you may or may not have access to, whether or not you're a customer of Arctic Wolf, I believe is the case. There are other similar scripts on the net. Don't have one right in front of me that I would be recommending, but we could follow up further with that. But there's going to be scripts that'll touch both Linux and Windows, so those resources are out there and available.
Mm-hmm. I've also seen a couple of pretty canned proof of concept, malicious code, and an app and a Docker image. So if you're nerdy like I am and might spend part of your weekend just seeing what you can do with that, there's plenty of things out there for that type of stuff. That's the blue team side, right? There's plenty of things out there that I've already seen on the red team. I saw a Twitch stream last night where somebody was using a toolkit to test how to do it as a red teamer, working on his penetration testing skills. So just as fast as the blue teamers are figuring out ways to remediate this and find it and turn it off, red teamers probably work faster because they get paid more. And then you have the nation state actors and the criminal organizations and all that kind of stuff. So there's good and bad out there, but the information is out there. So if you wanted to find it and tinker around, feel free.
There's a good one here we should touch on quick. Will this vulnerability result in further regulations for software? For example, requiring devs and publishers to report software bills of sale for tools, services, and other such dependencies. We hope so. And there have been a couple of these types of vulnerabilities that come to mind in the past 6 months, at least, where a shared library that is used in a wide swath of the internet, something happened with it, right? It was compromised, or as we see here, it was a vulnerability was found in it, right? And it does bring to light the shared responsibility model that that large software vendors have for contributing back to open source software, and in general for companies and developers and firms being good citizens as far as this stuff goes. But we don't know. We can hope so.
Yeah, I am less than optimistic that there will be regulations that are meaningful in the short term. Like I think the industry itself could get better about listing what packages and what repositories and stuff they use. A fun story about this particular engine. It is maintained by 2 or 3 part-time developers who are unpaid. I think they're in Ohio, or they're in the Midwest or something like this. So it's kind of funny that, like, look at how much trouble this has caused. And
Yeah.
it is 2 or 3
So
people who are doing their best and they're working on this thing and they're doing it. And it's an older version of the code. So, it's not like they're malicious or they're delinquent or anything, but, back to that graphic about that one little block that's holding the whole thing up. Using open source or using modules in general, takes a certain amount of responsibility. So dev teams have a ton of work on, regression testing and all this kind of stuff that they're getting pressed to push out software faster. And they're like, that's an old solid module. We're going to put it in there and we're never going to think about it again. And that is what got us in trouble in this particular case. Is it's the old standby. We don't have to do anything about it. It just logs stuff. And something like this comes out, and there was some chatter about responsible disclosure in the security industry, that if you find something like this, you're supposed to, it's bug bounty, you're supposed to go to the vendor and say, hey, I found this thing. They confirm it and they pay you money, and then you get 60 or 90 days to release the code of the vulnerability. And so you get recognition, and so you get more business doing that type of thing, and then they get a chance to patch the software. In this particular case, they could have told that group that maintains this, but it's in 500 pieces of software everywhere. They, that in this case was never going to work. So it's just kind of interesting, like this type of module or other modules like that could be the next thing that's like this. So
yeah, it's only going to get more common. And so like you said, I see it less about regulation and more about shared responsibility models. It is in companies, it is in software development firms' best interests to contribute back to these pieces of software, these open source modules that everybody's using, right? It's only going to get more prevalent as time goes on for us to have to deal with these types of things, and for us to put the proper resources on these libraries that are so important to the industry.
yes, exactly. So we wanted to keep this short. We've kept it to about a half an hour. It's a good even number. Like we mentioned before, I literally just found out that second CVE got its score raised from a 3.7 to a 9.0. So obviously this is something that's ever evolving. There's going to be a lot more information out there about it. Obviously, we're waiting on a bunch of information from vendors, if they are affected, if they're not affected, when they're going to release patches or mitigation steps. So this is something to pay attention to. If you are lost for the last half an hour and all of the geek speak that Joe and I are going through, that's what we're here for. We're here to help with these things. If you don't use Network Center for those types of services, find somebody you do work with, and it's ask questions. There's plenty of information out on the internet about this. But we can assist if you have any specific questions. Obviously, we're releasing information to our managed customers as we find more information. We're tracking a bunch of vendors and applications that a majority of our customers use, paying attention to those instead of just the whole list and sending that type of thing out. We will send out communications as we see fit, but we do have that resource page, which we'll be updating the most. So if you do remember one thing from this, make sure to bookmark netcenter.net/log4j. That's where we're going to put a majority of our updated information or link. It has the links to the CISA page and some other resources that we're using. That's where we're going to put our communication, like when vCenter's patch is out, things like that. So that's a good launching point to find more information. So, Joe, do you have anything else to add? You want to add anything to end of this?
Well, it should be good. We're here to help, so please reach out as needed.
Yep. So happy Friday, everybody. Stay warm. It's super cold here, so hopefully it's warmer where you're at. Have a good Friday and happy holidays.
Thanks.